either some more at the back or there's also some up top too, so feel free to make yourself comfortable. Not that I'm going to be talking for that long, hopefully. So my name is Myles, and I'm the past chair of the Bruce Peninsula Environment Group, as well as a local business owner. As of October, I also work for Parks Canada, but tonight I'm happy to have my BPEG and business owner hats on. So as many of you will remember, 16 months ago, we had our monumental first meeting on sustainable tourism. Right here at the Rotary Hall, we brainstormed the challenges and opportunities and ideas for a more sustainable approach to tourism. And yeah, there's many common faces who were in that room that night. From that meeting, we generated a wave of momentum that launched us into subsequent meetings, workshops, and conversation. And a few months later, into an important partnership with RTO7, as well as Parks Canada, the municipality, and Bruce County. Through the power of that partnership, we were able to enlist help from Oliver, Ray, and Alexis from 2031, and they're a Canadian consulting company with a plethora of national and international experience. And over the past 4 months, 2031 has helped us develop an action plan to manage local tourism and take steps towards becoming a world-class sustainable tourism destination. So 2031 wasn't able to be here tonight, but we thought it was important to present the draft strategy before it becomes the final one, to give another opportunity to we're getting pretty late in the process, however, to get some feedback so we can tweak it as necessary. They'll be presenting the final plan March 2nd. Also, Brian McCaddy, the chair of the steering committee, wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'll also be presenting his part of the presentation. So I'll just quickly introduce the rest of the steering committee, and those of you who are here can raise a hand. So Brian McCaddy is chair, Kelly McAdam from the Tobermory Chamber is vice chair of the steering committee. Alex Hogan has been absolutely amazing from RTO7. She's kept us right on track and on schedule. Bill Sullivan, also from RTO7. Bill Jones and Griffin Salen from the municipality. Tony Kishik from Chippewas of Nawash. Nicole Egan, Economic Development Officer for Bruce County. Ethan Meleg, Parks Canada. Jack Shank, representing the St. Edmunds Property Owners Association. And myself from BPEG. So 2031's approach consisted of kind of 4 key aspects. First of all, a clear vision. The plan's designed to deliver a widely embraced picture of success that can help us all get on the same page as a community and provide focus and direction in the long term. Secondly, the plan identifies a suite of strategy-driven priorities that will guide our projects and actions. Thirdly, 2031 didn't just consult with industry, but a wide variety of stakeholders in the community to truly make it our plan. And lastly, actionable recommendations. So the key to any successful strategy is a well-considered implementation plan that's realistic while responding to the long-term vision. So more specifically, we've developed a framework to help us monitor and prioritize the most critical issues. So there are I know you won't be able to see all the words here, but basically there was kind of 4 main phases of the process. The first one was their discovery phase, so that involved the project launch, 11 in-depth steering committee interviews, site visits, 7 in-person consultations, desk research, and competitive analysis. The second phase was the engagement phase, and so that involved an analysis of 98 stakeholder surveys, 17 external stakeholder interviews, as well as an in-person strategy workshop with 18 local stakeholders and representatives. In the third phase was their assessment phase, and that's when they kind of went to work and developed kind of the key strategies and the visitor management framework. And the last phase is hopefully just around the corner when we start implementing the plan. So they really did, there's been kind of community consultation every step of the way. So that said, you probably won't be surprised by the strengths and weaknesses and threats and opportunities that they identified. So some of the strengths include our beautiful natural environment, diverse outdoor activities, strong presence and awareness of the region. Alex mentioned that our community has the strongest volunteer community that she's ever worked with. Also, as we know, there's incredible access to a very large population, the GTA, and an international airport. However, we also have some weaknesses. So that means actual and perceived negative impacts, such as congestion, noise, and garbage, limited experiences visitors can purchase and engage with. Most of our activities are low cost or free. We have some ubiquitous workforce challenges, limited infrastructure, limited amenities and services. In some ways, we have lack of agreement on some of the community tourism priorities, and limited statistics and research in the tourism industry. In terms of threats, basically the biggest one being that these negative impacts of continued growth without having any sort of management could be pretty catastrophic. Also, just in terms of the degradation of natural and social and cultural assets. However, there's also some incredible opportunities. The key ones being that we could position ourselves as a leader in sustainable tourism, extended season into the shoulder months and winter tourism if we so choose, enhance local and regional collaboration, and this project's a great example of that, Indigenous tourism development, and creating an environment that's attractive to sustainably oriented entrepreneurs. So, recognizing these strengths, weaknesses, threats, and opportunities, we envision a future where tourism is developed to manage and mitigate negative impacts, promote conservation of natural, cultural, and heritage assets, maintain quality of lifestyle for local residents, encourage sustainable tourism investment and provide dividends for tourism operators, support employment opportunities, encourage amenity migration, which I had to Google because I was like, what does that really mean? It means migration to and for places of extraordinary physical and cultural and recreational amenities, obviously. Attract desirable types and visitor behaviors, and inform, educate, and facilitate appreciation of these values both amongst visitors and the local community. So through 2031's analysis, they kind of came up with 4 key pillars. The first one being community and industry engagement. And so this means how will we effectively communicate the direction, management, and implementation of the tourism plan with key stakeholders. So this could mean town hall meetings, just like tonight, online communications portal, an annual report, or regular stakeholder meetings. The second pillar would be product and experience development. So that would mean developing and refining our product and experience offerings to include itineraries for the shoulder seasons, for new areas, as well as cultural, culinary, and educational experiences. And these things will really help with the dispersal of visitors, so it's not just at our few key attractions that are full. The third pillar is investment and asset development. So that means securing stable funding for the plan's initiatives, as well as managing existing tourism infrastructure and developing new tourism assets. So this could mean helping direct the municipal parking revenues towards priority projects, or perhaps supporting the implementation of the visitor amenity fee that the Tobermory Chamber has considered, or soliciting other sources of funding such as the Ministry of Tourism or OMAFRA. It also means working with the municipality to develop and manage an infrastructure plan for hard assets that are linked to tourism, so washrooms, workforce accommodations, parking, roads, whatever the needs may be. And lastly was one that I was particularly interested in, and that was sustainability, positioning, and destination branding. So to appropriately promote, market, and communicate our brand in order to transition towards higher value and more experiential tours and experiences for visitors. So this also involves setting expectations before visitors arrive, so they know that we take sustainability seriously and they can remember to pack their reusable water bottle. I really liked this one because it linked with the manifesto campaign that we started last summer. If some of you recognize this, hopefully. And it could maybe mean further developing this to a sustainable tourism pledge, for example, to clearly communicate our sustainable tourism mandate to visitors and encourage them to uphold kind of our basic set of responsible travel principles. And this also helps us share the responsibility with our visitors, so it's not just on us as a community. Palau is an archipelago in Micronesia that was and is dealing with similar over-tourism challenges. And they've implemented something quite similar to this. So Palau became the first nation on Earth to change its immigration laws for environmental protection. So upon entry, visitors get this stamp in their passport, and they're required to sign the pledge. And this pledge is to act in an ecologically and socially responsible way on the island for the sake of Palau's children and future generations. Along with it is accompanied a checklist, and it simply says things like don't touch or step on coral, learn about the culture and people, don't smoke in restricted areas, support local businesses and communities, and that sort of thing. And if you don't adhere to these rules, then you risk getting a fine. But before we get to those 4 pillars and all the exciting projects and initiatives that would fall under those, 2031 really identified that we needed to address some more kind of foundational issues. So that's where they've kind of come up with these initial recommendations. And it pretty much meant that we need a more robust tourism governance model in order to have the capacity to effectively do those things. So firstly, it would be to form a tourism advisory group, a TAC or a TAG or whatever your acronym of choice is. Basically a group of 6 to 10 individuals representing key stakeholders with a balanced mix of business, government, and community groups to ensure tourism management is industry-led and market-driven and continues to consider the best interests of the community. The second step would be to empower this group through a charter, so basically a brief document that defines what their role will be, how will they be empowered to implement the plan, defining their resourcing, so this group can actually have a meaningful role. Thirdly, while we're very proud of our incredible volunteer community, there are certain jobs that deserve and require dedicated staff, like managing tourism. So kind of the next order of business is to develop a job description for a tourism development manager, and if council agrees, or more accurately, the community convinces council to agree, this hiring could be led by the municipality with guidance and support from the tourism advisory group. And then, along with dedicated human resources, we also need financial resources. So we would need to get some initial startup funds to allow some of the key initiatives to take place. So after we have the people and the money in place, then what? Well, then we'll have like a more solid foundation, and then what will we work on? Well, so that leads us to the limits of acceptable change framework that was advertised on the poster for this meeting. So basically, Limits of acceptable change is a type of visitor management framework that's performance-based and evidence-driven, and it will kind of allow us to address the most significant impacts, monitor progress, and adapt as needed. So this was first developed in the US in the mid-1980s, specifically kind of around Zion National Park and the kind of visitor management issues that were needing to be addressed there. Also, it's quite comparable to a framework that Parks Canada uses, both nationally and at our sites locally. So this is a systematic approach for understanding what undesirable impacts are occurring or may occur, and identifying indicators to monitor these impacts, setting limits or thresholds of acceptable change, and actively applying either direct or indirect management actions to address them. So I will admit that we inappropriately named tonight's meeting "How Much is Too Much?" The limits of acceptable change, people say that that's not really the question that we should be asking. And that's because the limits of acceptable change framework is not focused on simply determining the maximum number of people that a region can withstand, as this number is impossible to determine, and it's not outcomes focused. So instead, the framework focuses on determining the desired environmental, social, cultural, political, and visitor experience conditions, and taking action to stay within those conditions. So too will the negative impacts of the peninsula's environment, social well-being, cultures, and the quality of visitor experiences that we offer. However, these undesirable impacts occur through predictable patterns that, if we understand them through research, we can guide management, and with proactive and strategic planning, the undesirable impacts can be avoided or mitigated, thus allowing us to maximize our benefits from tourism. So, as you probably are all well aware, here's some examples of some of the key tourism impacts. So, in terms of environmental impacts, there's loss of habitat and habitat fragmentation, reduced water quality due to wastewater management and septic systems. There's also, in terms of social and cultural impacts, there's reduced quality of life for residents due to noise and traffic. Increased conflicts due to nuisance behaviors by visitors. Politically, there's issues such as funding for tourism is insufficient, as well as perceptions that there's increased local taxation as a result of growing tourism, so that all our tax dollars are needing to go to fund visitors rather than, serving local needs. And then it also impacts visitor experience. So unmet visitor expectations can lead to reduced quality of the experience, and then therefore people will be like, I'm not going back to the peninsula to visit again. Here's just a bit of a sample. Basically, we also recognize that these impacts aren't equally distributed across all parts of the peninsula. And 2031 recognized that. Some impacts are localized with small portions of the within small portions of the peninsula, while other impacts are occurring in multiple areas, but with differing levels of intensity. Therefore, they have segregated the peninsula into different types of zones. So there's the kind of national park zones, and then there's the downtown zones for Lions Head and Tobermory, the rural zones, and then the highway corridor zone. So each zone is spatially distinct and faces different impacts at different levels of concern. Some of the impacts that have been reported tend to be growing, while others are relatively stable. So this kind of shows, this is kind of the way they decided to depict it, that there's kind of different types of impact: environmental, social, cultural, and visitor experience, and the different colors kind of represent whether it's a low, moderate, or high concern, as an example. So then once we identify our impacts, then we need to think about how we're going to monitor them by identifying appropriate indicators. So for example, if the concern in the zone, like the downtown zone, is growing litter and increased municipal solid waste generation, then an example of an indicator would be the estimated kilograms of municipal solid waste produced by the tourism sector, annually or per visitor per night. And then you could also look at what percentage of operators are implementing programs to minimize their solid waste production. So for example, as part of my sustainable tourism certification at the hostel, I have to keep track of how many bags of garbage I take out to the curb each week and how many bins of recycling, and then that way now I have baseline data for 2017 so I can compare 2018 to see if I'm producing more or less and how to decrease it and set goals accordingly. Once we establish kind of baseline conditions and the limits or thresholds, then we monitor the data and determine what impacts we need to prioritize mitigating. So the reality is we have financial and personnel constraints, so we can't respond to everything right now, so we need some information to help us really prioritize what's going to have the most impact. So once we determine the priority impacts to address, then we kind of need to simultaneously manage supply, manage demand, manage the resource, and manage the visitor. And that's kind of how we're going to, those are the different ways that we can approach either through indirect or direct actions. So, in terms of an example of direct and indirect strategies, so for the highway zone, maybe an environmental concern is wildlife mortality, including species at risk. A direct strategy would be to undertake infrastructure enhancements, such as the eco-passages that the park's been installing to minimize potential for wildlife mortality. An indirect strategy would be to educate motorists or reduce speed zones. For the example of kind of increased motor vehicle collisions and emergencies and unsafe driving practices, a direct strategy would be to have increased enforcement during the peak season. I think that was something that was mentioned at the Safe Communities meetings that happened. And then indirect strategy would be an education program for motorists. So that's just kind of to give you a sense of what kind of some indirect and direct ways of addressing various issues are. So that's kind of the plan in a nutshell, a very small nutshell. The full document is 114 pages, but I thought I would spare you of all of that and give the 20-minute version of it. However, if you leave your email on the sheet at the door, then we'll send around a link to the full document, and you can provide comments between now and next Wednesday, February 14th. But at this point, we'll switch gears, and I have two tasks that you can do around these tables. The first one is just to kind of get a better idea of what exactly is the limits of acceptable change framework. So there's a few guiding questions here, and you could either choose to focus on Tobermory Village or kind of the Moore Street, Lions Head lookout areas, because it tends to be easier to conceptualize on a very kind of defined site-by-site basis. So the first step would be to describe the current condition in terms of environment, social and cultural, and visitor experience. Then the next step would be to describe the desired condition. So is it the same as it is now, or is it a little bit different? Then the third step is to try to think of possible indicators. And in terms of feasibility, try to think of data that might be already available. We don't, unfortunately, have teams of researchers to start collecting all this new data, maybe one day. But if we can just try to consolidate the data that might already exist, then that will make it a bit more feasible. And then kind of consider the thresholds for each indicators and identify appropriate management strategies. We probably won't get to all of those things, but that can kind of guide your discussion. And then about halfway through, we'll, or just kind of depending on what the interests of your group are, the second part is just general feedback on the plan. So pretty much 2 simple questions is what elements do you like about the plan? What elements do you think are really spot on, 2031 nailed it? And then what could be better? Is there anything that seems maybe a bit inaccurate, or is there anything missing? At this point, as I said before, we aren't going to do a full overhaul, but if there's some tweaking or some things that we kind of think that they should bring out a little bit more, focus on a bit more, I think they would be open to that feedback. So yeah, so we'll have about half an hour for that. And any questions? Yeah.
Mike Campbell, I'm born today. I'm just wondering, it's hard to plan ahead if we don't know the current state of affairs. We may actually be in a situation now where we are over capacity. So what do you do under those circumstances? How do you manage what we have already and also accommodate the new tourists that are going to come?
Yeah, those are big questions, and I guess that's why it's hard to think about. I guess that's where we can kind of capitalize on thinking back. So was 5 years ago the desired condition, or is it something that we haven't experienced yet? Because there's also like certain benefits that we can have from tourism. So I think we can kind of break it down into the environmental, social, cultural, or visitor experience aspects, and like what would be an ideal scenario. And it is tricky to kind of really figure out what that is, and I'm by no means an expert.
So we don't have any baseline data now to use as a guide for moving forward?
Some reports have been kind of consolidated of some of the tourism data that's been done. Probably the count, like we did get some reports and whatnot from the county and RTO 7 and the park. So there is some kind of baseline data, and that's what they derived the SWOT analysis from. Another aspect of this project too, we engaged a couple of master students in this inventory. So basically, the way I think about it is there's kind of 3 main components: transportation, activities and attractions, and accommodation. And those 3 things sort of have to be in equilibrium. And I would say maybe, so now as there's more and more cottage rentals and B&Bs and hostels and popping up everywhere, but we aren't necessarily growing our attractions at the same rate. So then now there's capacity for these people to be here, but maybe we don't have public transit to move them around efficiently, and we don't have enough things for them to do, especially if it's like a rainy day and the only thing for them to do is go to the Parks Canada Visitor Center. So that's kind of where we need to kind of look at those different aspects and make sure that those things are balanced. Just a couple more questions, then we'll kind of break out and then come back in.
I just want to address what you were just talking about, though, is there is data that is available, it's just not being compiled. First of all is nobody's really taken an inventory. Chamber did it years ago, probably about 5 years ago, take an inventory of how many rooms are available. That was long before the B&B explosion and all the other stuff. So there's a lot of data that isn't available. You can get on, if somebody took the time to go down and sit down and investigate all the websites. I've done business plans here, and I've come to a number of about 10,000 visitors a day. Now I've talked to some people down in South Bruce, and just Sauble they're looking at 40,000 people a day. So that's coming into that area. Obviously it's not just to the beach, but they just did an impact study on the MTO, so they have the traffic study that was just done this year. So the data is out there, it's just a matter of compiling it together to find out how many rooms are here, how many people are coming here, And that'll be a baseline as to whether or not we're at capacity or not. Once you know the number of people who are actually coming into your town, then you'll know if the washrooms are suitable, parking's suitable, and everything else.
For sure. Yep.
I thought one of the original focuses of this group was to, and we went through great lengths of definition of tourists versus travelers, trying to convert tourists that are up here one day from a bus from the GTA, turn around, leave, bring their bag lunch, drop their garbage off here and turn around, versus having the Bruce Peninsula as a destination for 2, 3, 4 days a week, and putting our efforts into keeping them here, driving economy, and spending time here rather than just their footprint.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's definitely been talked about in here, is like moving towards higher value travelers, because those of us in the accommodation industry know that it's, people spend the same per night, but if you're changing the sheets every single day, then it just, there's a big difference there. Yeah, so that's addressed, but I think that's going to be kind of a long-term thing of marketing to different people, and it's also part of its income levels, but I don't want this plan to come across as being elitist or anything like that, and I think it's also just attracting visitors that are aware and just conscious of their behavior, or maybe it's an opportunity to educate them once they're here to some extent. But yeah, I think it's kind of a long-term thing.
It's sort of bringing the private sector together, or fostering the private sector to identify those opportunities and make packages. They're not just going to a trail to hike in their own route. Here's something you can pay a quarter once for. Go out for.
Yeah, so when he visited, he mentioned all of the businesses and the property that the Ontario Parks and Rangers that, for example, are
I was going to say earlier, don't improve the road. Make it hills or safari bus. Yeah, so you can take the ride out there, part of your drive. I thought so, it doesn't even work for bicycles.
Okay, number 1. What was the question again? Anyways, our answer was lack of understanding on the trip. We dealt with the Moore Street portion of the questionnaire, and people wearing high heels, flip-flops, totally inappropriate footwear, expecting to hike 4 kilometers or not even knowing what 1 kilometer is. People also walking in the dark, unprepared, no headlamps, no water, no food, and also no parking, and dog shit everywhere, and garbage dumped on the side of the road. Not just bottles of water, but whole bags of garbage. So. Okay, number 2, describe the desired condition. This is where we dreamed big. So, civility in residential areas. In the wintertime, bring back the groomed cross-country ski trails. Have warning signs, like really frightening ones, that people should bring water, people should bring footwear, people should bring whatever they need, and a backpack so they can bring it all back. Yes, and common sense. It's not on the list here, but anyways. Okay, so educational signs, maybe even a flyer they can pick up somewhere, restaurants, whatever. We did think of washrooms at McCurdy, then we thought that wasn't such a good idea, so that's got a question mark beside it. Then we thought maybe there could be a little center in town, possibly at the high school. Everybody could park there. Could be a small information center. There's tons of parking at the high school. And then just they have to hike up the hill. It just makes their trail a little bit longer, but that might be good. Maybe have a big garbage center at McCurdy. Sorry, Milt, about that one. But So people could bring their garbage back in their backpack and then dump it there so they don't have to bring it home in their car. Have the trails rated as difficulty, like green for simple, red for challenging, whatever. Somewhere have a trail counter to count hikers, somewhere have a car counter to count cars. So we could put more information on shelves. Get people we want up here. Like attract the proper tourists or travelers or whatever. Go big or go home. That was Doug's idea. What about nature reserve or shuttle buses from Wyerton? Like having a little center in Wyerton. I know that doesn't have anything to do with Moore Street, but then we don't have parking on Moore Street either. And guided hikes. There's somewhere. Yeah. Okay, number 3, identify indicators. So I figure we probably all have the same indicators: garbage, speeding, injuries, and roadkill. And then finding data, Ministry of Transportation, hospital. If the people are injured, I guess the hospital might have data on that. What kind of injuries, if they're tripping or falling into crevices. Okay, and then consider thresholds.
It's okay if you didn't get to that.
I think we just put we're over the threshold. Over all the thresholds. And then we didn't get to number 5.
Well, there's lots of ideas.
But there's lots of ideas. Okay, part 2 was Thorsten thought I was being very, not very nice when I said this, but I thought the
So
plan,
this is on the plan.
so it's part 2, was vague, bureaucratic, and full of buzzwords. But then Thorsten said this wasn't the plan. I didn't read the plan, so how can I even judge the plan?
I removed a bunch of the.
So, anyway, then we got down to what is the plan, and there were a few specifics. So, what was that about?
Just forming another committee.
Oh, is the plan just forming another committee? Is that what it is? Anyways, let's do something now. So to make it better, let's do something now, let's do something this summer, let's do something next summer, let's get some concrete items, some specifics, let's do some alternative, thought, visionary things that can help make the peninsula, I don't know.
Make the peninsula great again.
There wasn't really a summary there, so that's kind of a flop ending, but there you go. Okay, next one.
I think
Oh,
this
any
idea-
questions?
I think this idea
Who wants
of
mine?
Here, Thorsten.
Oh, Thorsten.
I think this idea of directing tourism and creating mechanisms to direct tourism is something worth bringing up because, like I just come from a farmer perspective, we could host restaurant, fine dining experiences on our farm. Our neighbor has a bison farm, which is attractive even to the Southie people from Brampton. So, but we don't know where to advertise it or how to interlink with a stream that just runs straight to the grotto. And we have people in our Airbnb and we don't know if we wouldn't intercept them on our farm, where to intercept them so that they just don't all run into the same location, but there's better like distribution or dispersion. Orchestration. You want to bring them there where there's no people. And we need to get the information together of where do we still have capacities and utilize those. And without information, so there was this, we have a weather report, maybe we need a tourism report where people in hotels can immediately see, okay, there's still capacity.
And the visitor center's at the wrong end of the peninsula.
We also talked about McCurdy Drive and Lion's Head, and so we had a lot of what these guys said as well. We did also identify over parking too. There's a lot of parking and it's all summer, the whole road, so that's an issue, which is a hard one to solve. I'm trying to think of what else we had that they did not like. Garbage, we mentioned that, they mentioned that. The idea of parking, so if we go your idea of like the parking down at the school was, it came up, but then we thought the road going up there is a bit of a safety hazard as well, so maybe sidewalks or something like that to get people safely up that road to the trail. So that was a concern, an issue we brought up. Vandalism, there is some road camping out there and some people off trail and some garbage is definitely an issue. We didn't find any poop, but just garbage. Rock climbing was also, came up in our group too, that it maybe is not a concern, but it can be, like if people aren't doing it properly, so maybe just having guided rock climbing there or something, I don't know. So those were some of the issues we saw, as well as some of the things that they found and then desired. Great in the winter, I like the idea of ski trails, I like skiing. Well marked, so the trail system is pretty well marked right now, but maybe some more signage for interpreters, just again to educate the visitor as to proper etiquette and that kind of thing. And again, all that education, but what to do, what to wear, those kinds of things. Maybe ambassador hikers we thought would be kind of great, but then where do you get the ambassador hikers from? So these are all things that it came up is that a lot of that property is owned by Ontario Parks, and then they don't have any staffing to kind of be there and have any presence. So some good coordination with Ontario Parks, with municipality, Bruce Trail, other NGOs, maybe that would be a nice vision to have, some coordination there that we can kind of work together to then implement some of the things that we would like to see, more education and some presence really. What else? Oh, a donation box for money. What's the money? So a suggested donation or something at the parking lot. Maybe people would put money in it there and we could do something with that. QR codes came up as a possibility for signage, so you're not like over signaging things, but yeah, there's still a way for people to get some information. And what else did I miss anything, you guys? I think that was kind of in addition to some of the things that you said. And we only did 1 and 2. We didn't really get to 3 and 4 and 5.
Setting you up for failure.
So, sorry, we failed well. And then, so as far as part 2 goes, lakes, the way that they organize, so the approach of their data, and then suggested like the development indicators and how they're kind of separating that, and their approach in that was liked. And the suggestion of having like a staff member and some key leaders, like a leadership team and a group of people that can kind of move the ideas forward, because you need some core people. And what's missing is maybe some suggestions on, I mean, maybe it's in the report again because we didn't read the report. So where we need money, but where do we find money? Do they have suggested places for grants, methods to get money, those types of things? There was some concern about like bringing in the right visitor. What does that mean? Like just to be cautious of elitism, right? To like be welcoming to everybody. Maybe it's more of getting
White, male, middle-aged.
not allowed. Right? So you're saying, yeah. What was I going to say? Anyway, check you guys out. I don't remember what I was going to say now. What else? Oh yeah, and then discussion about, so we'd like to see, or maybe it's in there, some discussion as to what are the long-term things that require a cultural shift to make happen and to have success with versus the short-term things that we can actually have some quick success to gain momentum and to get things moving. So I don't know, again, maybe that's in the report, but it would be nice to have some guidance in that area as well. And I think, are you guys happy with that? Did I miss anything? No? Okay.
So look at me, I'm representing youth by standing up. Yeah. This is what we have. A lot of it has been said earlier, but we went into more depth on the search and rescue and the rock climbing thing. We thought that might be a nice source of data, because you can get the amount of injuries and how much it costs, because it's not cheap to save people's lives, unfortunately. It should be. And the parking. The parking is a perpetual issue, and it doesn't solve itself, although again, it should be. We had the idea of having the place is in, what's it called? Where's that spot? Gunpoint, the south end of that. That is a wonderful trail, and I hiked it just this last year. But there's not a whole lot of people ever there. So if the idea was to divert some of the overflow from the parking lot and the reasonable amount of people that the street can hold to that spot, because that's also a very nice spot, and there's room for development there that currently isn't. So another option was the money has to come from somewhere, right? Like it doesn't appear. So although it's difficult to do practically, we had the idea of like a snowmobile permit where you buy this and you have access to all the trails. You'd get the trail permit and then you have access to all the trails. Problem with that being people don't like spending money for things that are free, as of now. But there's also a lot of communication that needs to happen between people and groups that aren't really communicating now. And we also thought about some issues with the nature reserve, because hooray, it's a nature reserve, but because it's labeled like that, there isn't a whole lot of infrastructure or drive to put infrastructure. And I think that's about it. Yes, signs. In order to mitigate the search and rescue costs and all that entails, they put more "You Are Here" signs, because even in the day of cell phones, they die or you don't have a signal. So I have the little map that says, there you are.
Educational local businesses for different aspects for the new businesses especially, and put the potential to have a guide available for tour buses. So any tour bus that comes in has to have a guide that is able to educate them on the peninsula.
Okay, we're here to protect the land and the water, and by making more parking lots, we're going the wrong distance, we're going the wrong way. So we thought about maybe we need an interpretive center or something, and I think the group over there mentioned it, say around Wyerton, further south, before they get up here and have to turn around. And we have sort of information session about the total Bruce Peninsula, what's there, what it has to offer. And in such an interpretive center, we would have local merchants from all over the Bruce Peninsula. They could come and set up a kiosk and sell their wares, so we get a little bit of economic development and money spent. Traffic, again, was a deal sort of related to parking. Traffic, talked about traffic circles or traffic bumps, more police, different things we can do to look at the people that are coming north and sort of control it a bit. Help me out here.
I was like, can you read the
Ecotourism.
promotion?
More like hiking, tourism, and something more, right?
And I think a big part of it, like we didn't follow the structure up here.
That's all right.
We talked about going south to Wyerton, but why not to Toronto? Why not have some centers down further south where we could tell them about the Bruce Peninsula and what they should be prepared for? And I heard it over there somewhere, signage for tourist areas. I think that's sort of self-explanatory. Say two.
So our umbrella of concern is based around carrying capacity, and we would like to dial back about 5 years. And let's look at the numbers 5 years ago, and in terms of how can we best manage those numbers. Because we feel that it's a situation of quality, not quantity, and if we're coming here for these wonderful I use the example, forest bathing experiences. Well, we don't need the 401 to do that. We need to have it scaled way back. Who's speaking for the cedar tree routes? Human waste, garbage, those things have all been mentioned. In terms of the Moore Street example, we'll park them out in Ferndale, and we'll have a very, eco-efficient whatever transit system to get them there. And that way you control the numbers, and there's no parking issue because there just isn't any parking available. I mean, we've had the bounty of doing some traveling this year, and there are places all over the world where the controls are there, like it or not, but that's part of the experience. So, are we at that place? Yes, I think we're getting there. So let's not push it. So then you identify different areas on the peninsula in terms of, desirable places to be, and then determine a carrying capacity of each area. And then you can monitor that. You can do that through social media. You can have apps to say, okay, that area is full, but this area still has some room. Move people around. If the Wyerton bus situation is going to happen, then that's how you can move people around. But then you have an indicator of how many people per area you can accommodate to give you that quality of experience. So yeah, do we want more tourism development, or how do we manage where we are now, or in our case, we felt 5 years ago was probably sustainable. Yeah.
Did you talk about how you enforce, like in certain areas, like it's gated attractions such as the national park?
Oh,
so
I'm
it's
afraid we've got
easier?
gates. Oh, absolutely. And we pay for the experience. You get off the ferry in Tobermory, you're going to pay right there.
Yeah.
To drive even through. That's just, you're going to pay at the south end, you're going to pay at the north end. You're going to have controlled parking, you're going to have much more infrastructure for transit, collective transit rather than individual cars.
We compared it to Banff and to Cape Breton. And both of those places you have to go to the tourist office and you get educated about how you need to respect and use the facilities, and then you have an opportunity to use them.
I think when it comes to capacity, it focuses a lot on the fact that likely every one of us in this room are private property owners. Some of you are running businesses, but everybody in this room are likely private property owners. And it's a case of how much we want to share the public property beyond our lot lines with a mass of people that are coming through. There's some wonderful tourists that come, and we need to, and tourism is an industry. It's been good to our family from a standpoint that my daughters, who are all now in their 30s and 40s, had jobs here in the tourism industry years ago, and it was good training for them. But in the meantime, with the overflow of what's happening here, we're getting overflowed beyond where a lot of us want to be in what we're wanting to release. And our municipal council has tried, I think, really very hard with a lack of a plan. And that is where we're coming with that the plan itself is good, but it's very focused on growing tourism so that we can maintain it at a higher and higher level. And we can't even handle what we have right now. This rapid expansion in the past few years is fast depleting the beauty and the sustainability of the resources and ambience of our community. The depletion encompasses not just the land base, but the services of sewers, water, garbage disposal, parking, access, fire, and safety. All are big ticket items that must have funding and timelines committed before we can go any further. The last meeting I came to this building, I stood outside for half an hour because the fire chief wouldn't allow us in because it was capacity. We experienced the same thing at the arena this year, that when the planning things came up and it got overloaded beyond the capacity of what the room was rated for, they stopped people coming. So we can't listen to this argument any further that we can't put gates on. Many areas of Canada are and are using it as an income source to provide better facilities that the tourists that do come, that we can handle in proper numbers, are going to have a good experience. I look at one thing here, and I mentioned it to a few people in the past. We need to get this right. Our past history of the last 200 years our forefathers came, and this is with our native brothers and sisters sitting here right tonight, and we trampled past them. We fished until there was no more to do in fishing. We came onto the land then and took the best timber off until there was no more to do with that. And both of those resources have never recovered from that fully. And now we're into tourism, and this thing goes in a pendulum. And we gotta watch that we're not swinging too far in this pendulum, and we're destroying the very thing that we all came here and love to be here with.
Okay, we took a bit of a different approach. We're the Tobermory region, and we're attacking this sustainable tourism from a tourism aspect, not so much from a reactionary to the amount of masses coming here. What we did do is take inventory, because most of us are either accommodators or operators or volunteers here, and we're on the front lines of what the visitors are saying and what their comments are. So congestion obviously is a big issue. Now, Tobermory has been addressing these issues, the chamber and the municipality. One of the big things is we get the grocery store out of town, and I'm not privy to what all the holdups are, but we got to get out of there as soon as possible. Congestion in the restaurants, congestion in other areas. Obviously, parks is another congestion area, and all those activities. Lack of other activities. What we're finding is the groups between the 18, basically the driving and drinking type of age, 18 to 35, those people are craving for more activities, and they don't have them other than what the parks and other adventures are from a nature adventures. Most of these people are coming up to experience the nature up here, do other things. I mean, most of these people live in cities, so they do all sorts of other things. So the other thing is we don't have enough things to do on rainy days, which was already mentioned before. Part of the problem with lack of activities is the lack of places to put them and zoning and other stuff. It's a complex issue, but I know that the county is working on that right now as well. Perceived value. First of all, they come up here, they pay a lot of money for a room to stay here, and there's a lot of turnover. And somebody also mentioned today about the amount of expense on turning over a room every day as opposed to turning over every 2 or 3 days. The tourists I've known, I've been here for 15 years as an operator. I've been living here for 20 years. When I started operating here as an operator, our season was 10 to 11 weeks, and we're bridging on 12 weeks. Within 6 years, I saw it go down to 6 weeks of tourism. It's slowly growing, but that's only because people are so congested, they're being pushed out into the shoulder seasons. That's the only reason it's growing, into those shoulder seasons. So, and those are the people that were so upset that, a lot of them were so upset they've come back to experience it because either an operator or a restaurant or an accommodator has said, come in the spring or fall, you're going to have a better experience. Now, all of that has, a lot of what everybody's talked today is about congestion. But we also talked about the type of tourists that we're having coming up here as well. And I'm not talking race, religion, creed, color, whatever. I'm talking about the people who are willing to spend money here, and the people who are going to be here for more than 1 or 2 days, or even more than 3 or 4 hours for that much. So we're targeting a market that's coming up here all for the same things. They're all coming up at the same time, and that's where the congestion's happening. Jack, I agree with you that the congestion is too much, and we do need to scale it back in some way rather than try to accommodate it, because you can't accommodate the numbers that are happening here right now. You can in the shoulder seasons, but then we come back to the staffing issue. The staffing issue is down to, again, zoning regulations, the fact that our season is so short. There's monumental things that are in place here that are going to be very complex to change, and it's not going to happen overnight. But one thing, Roger Brooks has been up here twice. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Roger Brooks, but this guy knows his stuff. And we have not addressed any of the stuff that this guy's told us twice. Okay, this guy has developed places like Whistler, Banff, the Niagara region. This is just in Canada. He's all over the world. And the things that he basically said, we need, if we consider ourselves a premier destination, we need at least 10 top restaurants, 10 top activities, and 10 top accommodators. And we're not talking 5-star, whatever. We're just talking about basically what the average traveler expects. And we don't have it, I gotta tell you. So we're disappointing our customers coming in here. Now, so we're talking about what the customers, the experience that they're having right now. We talked about addressing a lot of these issues. Safety is obviously concerns and all these good. That's basically on the impact of the influx that we're having coming in here. But if we want to have a better customer coming up here that's going to spend money and that our tourism is going to actually be sustainable, and that's what I look at as tourism. As an operator, I'm looking at sustainability, that this area is going to survive this influx of people. Because we do need washrooms, we do need these things, right? It takes money, and it costs money. I can tell you right now, as an operator, I have a hard time investing money into this area when it's all being channeled towards Parks Canada. And I realize I'm sitting in a bunch of people that came here for that reason and that reason only. I love this area. I love the fact that I can go out and jump on, I'm back right onto Parks Canada. I can get right onto there and camp. I can do whatever I want, and it's right at my fingertips. And that's great for me, and I want that experience for everybody else. But we need staff housing, we need all sorts of things for the people to survive here as an environment. If you've looked at Bruce County right now is paid, the average income here is $10,000 lower than anywhere else in Ontario, and that includes Northern Ontario. It's just incredible, and that's why we don't have enough staff housing. We don't have, anyway, I could go on and on. So, anyway, in short, as far as an overview on the plan that I've seen, because I've read it, it's still the status quo that I've seen for 10 years, okay? It's always the same thing. How are we going to deal with the parks? How are we going to deal with the trails? How are we going to deal with that? I travel all over the world as well. And everywhere around the world, if they want to increase their market share in a different type of clientele, you have to start marketing to that other clientele. They're coming here to Parks Canada. We see it, okay? If you want to reduce the amount of people coming here to Parks Canada, stop advertising it, all right? Stop worrying about marketing to that crew. They're already going to be here. Word of mouth is enough for that type of clientele. They know where the experiences are here. But the selfie sticks are fast and furious around here. I mean, you see them everywhere. They're all coming here, take their photo ops, and leave. That's not good for our tourism. Anyway, that's what I think should be addressed.
Basically, Lion's Head has a lot going for it. You know, it's got a Bruce Trail, lighthouses, lookouts, summer market, music, marina, beach, vistas, a service town, water use, beach, Friday night music, and astronomy. Some of the challenges are lack of parking near the beach and the lighthouse, limited outdoor eating opportunities, limited overnight accommodation opportunities, lack of sewage infrastructure, lack of water activities and equipment, lack of a laundromat for boaters and renters, no bike rentals, and it needs better signage to direct people where to go. I'm just trying to give you the Coles Notes version here. Things that could be expanded is Friday night music, could host music festivals, guided snowshoe hikes, cross-country skiing, cooking classes, weekends, visitor chefs, bike tours, boat tours. Currently no boat tours. I'm thinking a nice big jet boat up the side there. Improved parking, rock climbing guides, why not? Fishing charters, and that's it. I have my own personal peeve, because I'm from Tobermory. I think there's a couple things going on in my mind with Tobermory, And a lot of the issues could be solved if we get rid of the car. You go to Europe, anywhere, I was in Italy, the 5 villages, they don't even allow cars downtown. Everybody parks outside and walks down. I know the municipality is working towards that, but once you remove the cars from the equation, we won't get the congestion, we won't be jockeying for parking spaces, and we can accommodate more people in the village. And I also think that really where we need to get to is that everybody plans their trips before they hop in their car to come here. Parking at the park should be in advance online. Boat tours should all be booked ahead of time. Accommodation should all be booked ahead of time. Even restaurant reservations for restaurants. So the marketing should be, don't come unless you're booked. And if you keep on stressing that, the guests will have a better time, and they'll understand that it's a limited resource, and you can charge more for it, so people will make more money. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think we're definitely moving in that direction of booking everything in advance. So I think that's well underway. Which is, and the pedestrianized downtown, that was something that came out as an idea time and time again at our first meeting, and I think it's very viable, and we just need, you know, a focused group to move that forward and make it happen and address whatever barriers there are at the moment. Anyway, so that's it for tonight. So if you want to receive a link to the full plan, just be sure to write your email address on the sheet on your way out. And you can email any additional comments to info@bpeg.ca. I'll be sending them off to the consultants on next Wednesday. So just make sure you get them in before then. And do keep in mind that, you know, we aren't rewriting the whole thing. I think under the direction of the steering committee and their extensive consultations, they definitely are on the right track. So we're just kind of doing some tweaking here and there. And then once we really own the plan, we can decide, you know, what actions we're gonna take on first. And yeah, thanks for coming out on a, well, not too blustery, but cold winter night. So and then the final plan will be, they'll be presenting it to the steering committee on March 2nd. So stay tuned.